Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything. I'm coming at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. This is a continuation of our Painting 101 tutorial series. I've gotten to the video where I'm choosing the right brushes for the project. So what you want to know is my favorite brush for painting 28mm figures is this 1.5" wall trim brush. This is where I get the best detail. Oh, I don't. Let me put that down. That is not true. Okay. Sorry. All right, so let's remove this. Let's take a look. Here we go. We got some brushes. Now, I use this mainly for terrain. You've probably seen me apply glue or paint over large pieces of terrain like hills and things like that. That's what this is for. Let's get rid of it. All right. When you go into doing your painting, each part of your painting will require a different brush. You cannot use one brush to do all of your painting. It just can't happen. So what you need to do is find the best brush for each job. All right, so that's the key, really. Now, here we go. Let's get those there. These there. And that over there. Okay, there we go. So I've got like 3 different jobs, or multiple jobs here, actually. All kinds of different brushes. And then I've got my brushes in my handy-dandy paintbrush holder that my friend Mike made for me. He actually laser printed this holder, and then these are the paintbrushes that I will be using. But let me explain how I go through that process and why I choose certain paintbrushes. Because remember, this series, this tutorial series is not about a specific job. Even though I am going to be using everything in this tutorial with these French line infantry, these techniques can be applied to any models. Okay, so if you're painting an orc, or if you're painting an elf, or if you're painting a space marine, or if you're painting a battleship or a tank or whatever, all these techniques apply to all those types of painting. So here we go. These are the different. This is what goes to your mind when you're choosing your paintbrushes. And first of all, I've had a lot of these brushes. Some of these brushes I've had for probably 20 years, and I'm still using them. So there's different qualities of brushes. You can find some brushes cost 25 cents. Like I've seen bags of brushes that you could get at, a department store, and you'll get a bag of these brushes for like a couple of bucks. And I'll tell you right now, those brushes are going to be okay for doing certain jobs, but not for painting details on your models. Though you want to avoid cheap. Okay? The more you invest in your brush and the more time and effort you invest in keeping your brushes in good health, the longer your brushes will work. Okay, and longer they'll last for you. So you get more return on your money. Okay, so I have a tendency to buy hobby-specific brushes. Like you can see, I've got some Citadel brushes. I have, like this brush over here is like a tester's brush. Actually, it's not a tester's brush. This is an Eagle gold brush that I've had. That's one of the ones that I've had for 20 years. Okay, this is a tester's brush. And this one's not a nylon. It's a, what do they call that? Basically, the brush is plastic. The bristles are like almost completely plastic. This will not hold paint very well. I'll tell you right now. And it will leave streaks in your model. So what I use this brush for is applying my glue to my bases for when I am going to apply my grit. Okay, that's what I use this. I only brush PVA with this brush. This is my PVA glue-in brush. And then what I do is you wash it afterwards and it stays in good health. I mean, you can see, hopefully I got you can see that it's actually got pretty good health or after millions of years. Okay. I have another brush here that I don't use to paint figures with. And I don't think paint's ever touched this brush. I don't think paint has ever touched, or let me back that up. I don't think wet paint has ever touched this brush, ever. I use this brush, and you could use a barber brush or any other. This is like a super soft brush. It's from Art Color. What it is, it's a 3/4 inch brush. It's all this is a duster. I use this brush to clean models. So if I ever get like dust and dirt on a model, I'll go in with this and I'll dust it off, you know? Or if I ever need to like clean some flock off of a base, because a lot of times I'll flock the base, I'll shake it off, but the flock will still be, there'll be still a little bit of flock on there. Well, I'll go in with this brush and clean the flock off and knock it back into the bucket or whatever. And I'll turn my bases over and I will clean any flock that might be on the bottom with this brush. This is my duster, my cleaner, yeah. You get it. Okay. All right. So then there's this brush. This brush is, and this brush, yeah. Okay. Well, we'll talk about this brush. I'm jumping around. Sorry. I'm kind of working backwards because these are my specialty brushes, and then these we'll get into in a minute. But this brush here, you can look at this brush and you can see that it has seen better days. This brush, how about if I hold it this way? You can kind of see that this brush is horrible. It's nasty. But you know what? I love this brush. I use this brush when I am applying my dip, because I'm not the kind of dipper that takes a can of dip and a model and submerge it in the dip, pull it out, and set it off to the side. I know that's a technique, and that's why it's called dipping, but I don't do that. I take my model and I dunk this brush that's seen better days, and then I apply dip everywhere that I want to apply it, which is 100%, but if there's any bubbling or any like if it gaps between the two legs or something, I can get this brush in there and pop that bubble, or do any of that with my dip that way, and I can move the dip around to make sure it settles where I want it to settle. And my dip is a polyurethane, and I have to use like mineral spirits or acetone to clean this brush. And so this is my oil. All it is just a dip applicator. It doesn't have to be accurate at all, and that's why I don't mind it having all these flares. Okay. All right. Putting these brushes off. Now I got these brushes right here. These are different style brushes, and both of these two are from Celt.Gaul, and I will strongly recommend Celt.Gaul brushes. They usually have sable fibers. I like sable, but I also I think I prefer nylon, but sable is also a really good brush. Okay, now you can see that this is a heavy duty brush, and it's a stiff bristle brush. Well, for one reason, it's called a tank brush, but really what it is, it's just a giant dry brush. That's really all it is. This is a brush where you would, because it's stiff bristle, I use it to dry brush large items like tanks or buildings. Okay, but that's not going to be these French. That's not going to happen with this brush. So we probably won't be using that brush. But there's also what they have is a small dry brush, and it also has a stiff bristle. And this brush I use whenever I need to dry brush any like facial features, basically anything, uniforms. If I'm ever going to highlight or dry brush anything, I use this brush mostly because of the stiff bristles. You want a stiff bristle when you're going to do dry brushing, and the reason why that is hypothetical. Let's say I've got fingers, right, and I dry brush my fingers on my models, and you're going over the fingers with your brush. If it's stiff, it'll pop from ridge to ridge to ridge to ridge as you go across. It'll pop, 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 right? And then your paint will only stick to the ridges. If you use a soft brush, there's a tendency for it to go down inside of each of the canyons, right? And so you can't hardly dry brush with a soft brush. It has to be stiff. And that's why I have the small Citadel dry brush. And I really do like the Citadel brushes. Go back to that, I really do. Okay, but I do have this brush here. And this is actually ox fur. This brush is made out of ox fur. It's a 1/4 inch brush, but it is stiff. And it's only become stiff because of my paint. Over the years, this brush has gotten stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. I try cleaning it. I try soaking it acetone. I am able to clean it up enough to make it like a small tank brush, right? So it's a lot like this is still flexible. You can see that this is still flexible, but this is a lot less flexible. What do I use this for? I usually use this for dry brushing bigger items, but not as big as a tank. Sometimes I'll use this to dry brush parts of a tank, like the treads or something like that. I also notice that you'll also notice that it's a flat. So I can actually dry brush this way, or I could dry brush this way, just depending on what I'm trying to accomplish. This brush has been with me a long time. Okay. Now we're getting into the meat and potatoes. When you're actually painting your figure, and I'm not talking about dry brushing or highlighting or any of that stuff. When you're actually applying the majority of your base coat on your model, and then once you get your base coat on, that's when you're going to do your dipping. Okay, when you apply your base coat, you want to have, and this is true, you want to have the largest paintbrush for the job. So if your job is, let's say, painting these backpacks, right, which is a pretty large piece, you don't want to use a brush. Okay, I think I can see brushes like that. You don't want to use a brush like that, right? Because that tip is, I think it's a 5.0 probably. Might even be smaller. Might be a 10.0. So you don't want to use the smallest paintbrush, even though you get some good details with that, to paint backpacks or paint the pants. You don't want to use that. You want to use something bigger. You know, you want to go maybe with a 1, right? A 1 or a 0. And then you can paint the backpack with a larger paintbrush. Okay? And you don't need to have super details when you're doing base coats. You're just trying to coat the whole model, really. But now if I'm trying to do a turn back, a thin piece, or if I'm trying to do a strap, then of course I'll go in with a small brush. Right? Okay. The reason why you want to use the largest brush possible is because what you're doing is you're taking paint from a paint bin or a mixed palette and you're trying to get it onto the figure. So you have to dip your brush in the paint and carry the paint over to the model. If your paintbrush is too small, it will dry faster on the brush and you're carrying less paint over to the model. So you want to have the biggest brush, but you don't want to have a brush so big that it's too big for the job. So basically you just have to tailor the size of the brush for the item that you're painting. Having said that, what is that telling you? That's telling you, and what is this telling you? That's telling you have to have more than one brush. You can't just get in there with a Citadel starter brush, which these brushes are awesome, but you can't get in there with a Citadel starter brush and paint everything on the model. You can paint most of it, but not all of it, right? And then when you go back in to dry brush it, you don't want to use this to dry brush. For one thing, dry brushing a normal brush tends to ruin it. So you want to make sure you have a stiff bristle brush. Plus, it won't be effective. It'll get into the cracks, and you don't want to do that. Okay, a cautionary warning right here, and this is something you might learn on your own. But you have this metal piece right here holding the hairs right onto the wood or plastic or whatever you're using. Now this is called the flume. The flume has the hair bristles going into this piece, right? It's how it holds the brush together. If you go to dunk your brush into the paint and you go as far as 3/4 up the bristles, what will happen is the dry bristles underneath, the dry bristles in your flume will soak the paint into the flume. So what will happen is paint will get down inside this flume and will harden. And you will not be able to clean it. You'll try, you won't succeed. So that paint inside the flume will ruin the bristles, because once that paint inside the flume dries, it kind of causes the bristles of the brush to do one of these numbers. And so you get something that looks like that. I've had paint get into my flume, obviously. If you want to keep your paintbrush pristine, never go more than halfway up the brush with paint. Okay, so when you're painting, be very careful not to get paint all over the brush. Now, the paint brushes that I will be using, I will probably be using a Celt.Gaul starter brush, because I think Celt.Gaul make probably some of the best. Now, I have not tried Army Painter, but I heard Army Painter are good brushes. And you know what? I might order a set of Army Painter brushes just so that I will have experience using them. My understanding is Army Painter and Celt.Gaul are very similar. So I'm thinking about getting some. Okay. The brushes I am using are these guys right here. These brushes I use almost exclusively. They have a larger handle. I bought these brushes at Hobby Lobby, right? I get a lot of my modeling supplies at Hobby Lobby. Why not get my paint supplies there? These brushes came in a bag of one of every size, right? And it wasn't expensive. It was probably like $19 or something like that for these brushes. Some of the Celt.Gaul brushes, you'll pay over $20 for a Celt.Gaul brush on some brushes. So be careful when you go to pick those up. But these I found at Hobby Lobby. They're kind of a generic name. I don't even remember the name on these. They don't even have any writings on them. And the reason why, I don't paint by the numbers. I don't look at my brush and say, oh, I got a 3.0, that's perfect. And then, oh, I got a 5.0, that's perfect. That's not what I do. I look at the tip. I look at the bristles. Is this the size that I need? And then I use it. I don't need to know a number. I don't need to know it's a 3.0 or a 10.0 or a 0 or whatever it is. I just say, okay, I need something this big. And then I do it. So, I've chosen the right brushes. I've got my specialty brushes over here. I have a few other brushes. Okay, this is another thing. Okay, let's talk about these. Remember I was showing you this Eagle Gold. I've had this a long time. The hairs on the tip of this, and you can kind of see the flume is getting loose, and the hairs on the tip of this is starting to curve, starting to curl up like that. That's not a problem. If your brush starts to curve at the tip, don't fret. But it's also starting to fray. Not only is it curving, but it's fraying. And so I probably will be throwing this brush away soon. Or I'll be using it as a mixer. Okay. This brush is a symbol of what not to do. This is a great brush. This brush was one of my favorite brushes, and it still is. It's just bent. But I left it in a box for about a month with it pressed up against the edge of the box. And now I've got a hook, which what I use this brush for anyway is painting bases. Paint the bases brown, or I paint the bases green, or whatever. I'm gonna have to do something to get this. I'll have to do some work on this to get this to be straight. Maybe soak it in some acetone and straighten it up in a tube. I'll probably have to get like a straw and put it inside of a straw to keep your bristles protected. That's another thing. You can use like a drinking straw to keep your bristles protected. Okay, now this one, you'll notice how, I don't know if you'll notice, but I'll put it up here so you can see. This has been cut by me. I've cut some of the bristles off because this brush, those bristles were going crooked. So I used an X-Acto knife to cut those bristles off, and now I have a half a brush basically. But all I use this for is, again, I use these two brushes to paint terrain. I don't paint figures with these two brushes. I might use these to paint like a wash, sure, like a primer or something like that in a spot that I might have missed. I'll use these brushes because these are not detail brushes. These are just brushes. Okay. Now I have a dozen more brushes over on my shelf that I'm a hoarder, so I haven't had the guts to actually go and throw them away. But I probably should, or turn them into some kind of tent poles or something. All right, so that was choosing the right brush. The next video is actually going to be paint application to these figures. I'm looking forward to this because I haven't been able to go and just paint these models because I've been doing this step-by-step tutorial. But starting the next video, I'm going to be starting that, and I'm super excited for that. So come on back and check that out. And thank you for coming out and checking out this video, and I'll see you next time.